Chapter 8 The General is a Spy, in which a traitor offers to sell out his country for British gold. Sometime after General Benedict Arnold took command in Philadelphia, he sent for John Stansbury, a local merchant who was despised by the Patriots. Why? Why, Philadelphians wondered, would Arnold want to have anything to do with Stansbury? He was a hated Tory. Before the British occupied the city, Stansbury taunted patriots by singing "God Save the King," urging them to join him in the chorus. He was arrested for his Tory activities and briefly jailed. When the Redcoats marched into Philadelphia, the Patriots despised Stansbury even more because he went to work for the British, doing various jobs for General Howe. To Stansbury's surprise, he later wrote, Arnold communicated to me, under a solemn obligation of secrecy, his intention of opening his services to the commander-in-chief of the British forces. In other words, Arnold wanted to be a double agent for the British. Arnold, a spy for the British? Stansbury could hardly believe it. Arnold was a brave and faithful soldier. He had run away from home at the age of 14 to fight in the French and Indian War. He had joined the Continental Army as a colonel and led soldiers to victories in Fort Ticonderoga and at Saratoga. He had twice been wounded in battles against the British. Washington considered Arnold to be his finest battlefield commander. Limping from his wounds, Arnold could not hold a field command, so Washington had put him in charge of the American forces in Philadelphia. Arnold lived grandly, holding parties and spending money far beyond his soldier pay. Arnold needed money to live in a mansion and keep his stylish new bride happy. She was the beautiful 19-year-old Peggy Shippen, the daughter of a wealthy Tory family. She was also a close friend of Major John Andre, England's chief of intelligence in America. Complaints from Congress about Arnold piled up. A military court found that his greed for money and power had led to his involvement in shady deals. After meeting with Andre, Stansbury later wrote, I went secretly to New York and contracted Andre. Andre used Stansbury as a cutout, a person who links the agent and the case officer. By using a cutout, Andre could stay in New York and never be caught in the company of his agent. Andre, through Stansbury, taught Arnold to write in an invisible ink and use a book code. A tough code to break. The code was based on a well-known book owned by both Andre and Arnold, Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England, as Andre explained in the code. 3 numbers make a word. The first number is the page of the book. The second is the line on that page, and the third is the word on that line. Coming from the left, 293.9.7, for example, directs Andre to page 293, line 9, word 7. Not every word was put into numbers. That was the tricky part of the code. If someone happened to see a letter written by Arnold or Andre, it would look like a kind of coded letter that merchants would normally write to keep their business secrets from being learned by competitors. For instance, Arnold would not want to write out Stansbury's name. He would just write Mr. S., and Andre would fill in the rest. Here is a part of the letter from Arnold to Andre. Andre, using his copy of the book, would decode the numbers. In the decoded version, letters inside brackets showed how Andre would finish the words, where only the first letter had been given. I wrote to Mr. Captain Beckworth on the 7th of June that a French fleet and army were expected to act in conjunction with the American army. At the same time, I gave Mr. Stansbury a manifesto intended to be published in Canada. Arnold passed the British many secrets, such as how many French troops were landing in America and where, and when they were landing. He also revealed an American-French deception plan, the manifesto mentioned in the letter. That was supposed to make the British expect an invasion from Canada, but When Arnold told them that he was to take command of the fort at West Point, the British knew they had the man who could give them the most important military post in America. West Point guarded the Hudson River, a prize that the Americans held and the British desperately wanted. British generals saw West Point as a key to victory. A glance at a military map shows why. The fortresses stood high on a bluff on a sharp curve of the river about 50 miles north of New York City. From its heights, West Point looked down on smaller forts on both sides of the river. Stretched across the Hudson was an enormous iron chain that blocked enemy warships. As long as the West Point complex of forts was held by the Americans, its guns would keep enemy ships from ascending the river. If the British held West Point, they could cut off the northeastern colonies from the others. Washington had hoped that Arnold would be able to take command of the combat troops, but Arnold, claiming that his old wounds still kept him from battle duty, successfully pleaded for the command of West Point. As soon as he got the post, he offered to arrange the surrender of West Point to the British for £20,000, a sum equal to well over $1 million today. Anxious to make the deal, Arnold insisted on a personal meeting with Andre. A very dangerous move, especially for the case officer. Such a move has to be arranged in a complicated way with cut-out code letters and a safe house, a place where the case officer and his agent will not be detected by counter spies. Each step along the way is risky, because the enemy's counterintelligence officers often notice some little slip that leads to capture. Washington learned from some of his agents operating in New York that some secret expedition is in its contemplation, the success of which depends altogether on its being kept a secret. That bit of information did not help very much until afterward, when Washington and others realized that the secret expedition was the seizing of West Point by the British as soon as Andre betrayed it. Arnold tried to learn the identities of American agents in New York by writing first to Washington and then to one of his officers. Neither one would help him because of a basic spy law. Give information only to those who need to know. Arnold was not one of those people. Major Benjamin Talmadge, who was running New York's Culper Ring, heard about Andre's inquiries. He certainly must have become suspicious, especially when he got a letter from Arnold saying that a Mr. John Anderson, a person I expect from New York, should be given an escort, taken to Arnold. Talmadge had to wonder why Arnold was running his own agent in New York. Meanwhile, Arnold arranged for a boat under a flag of truce to take a Tory woman and her children across the Hudson to an area held by the British. The woman carried a letter to Andre, asking him to come to West Point disguised as a merchant named John Anderson. Andre refused, for he was well aware that if he disguised himself, he could be hanged as a spy. If he was captured in uniform, he would live as a prisoner of war. Arnold insisted that he could protect Andre, claiming him as an agent working for the Americans. Finally, Andre reluctantly agreed to wear civilian clothes. Arnold arranged to meet Andre at a safe house on the Hudson River. But British gunboats fired on the barge that was carrying Andre across the river, and he was forced to return to West Point. For the next meeting, Andre, dressed in a uniform of a British officer, and was to arrive via British warship the Vulture. He would be dropped off downriver from West Point, and there a Tory friend of Arnold would pick up Andre and take him to Arnold. The general's cover story was that Andre was really an agent named John Anderson, whom Arnold was personally running. Andre did not like the cover story, but he went along with the plan. As Arnold and Andre were meeting at a riverside safe house, they heard gunfire. American canoe were firing on the Vulture, which quickly weighed anchor and sailed away. Andre now had no exit. Arnold had brought sketches of the fortifications of West Point, which Andre, as an experienced intelligence officer, memorized and handed back to Arnold. But the general, to ensure he would get paid the money he had been promised, insisted that Andre take the sketches as proof that Arnold had carried out his side of the bargain. Reluctantly, Andre put the sketches inside his boots. He hastily disguised himself by replacing his red coat with a purple one and putting on a round civilian hat. His boots had no military markings and could pass as civilian. Arnold assured Andre that he would be safe going overland to the British lines because he would have a pass signed by General Arnold himself. While the general made his way back to West Point, Andre set off for White Plains, New York. There, the pass supposedly would get him through American lines to safety in British-held territory. But 3 American militiamen stopped him on the road. In the darkness, he thought at first that they were Hessians or British and identified himself as a British officer. Then, seeing that the men were Americans, he shrugged that off as a joke. When they said they would search him, he tried to bribe them with his gold watch and the equivalent of $50,000. I searched his person effectually, but found nothing until I pulled off his boot, when we discovered that something was concealed in his stocking. One of the militiamen later wrote, I pulled off his stocking, and inside it, next to the sole of his foot, found 3 half sheets of paper enclosed, and another half sheet which was endorsed West Point. And on pulling off the other boot stocking, I found 3 like paper. The militiamen took him to an American outpost where, thanks to an order from Arnold, Mr. Anderson was expected. The officer at the outpost sent the suspicious papers to Washington, who never received them, and sent Anderson under guard to Arnold. This was good news to Andre. That night, Major Talmadge happened to be at another nearby American outpost. There, he learned that someone named Anderson had been picked up and sent on to General Arnold. Talmadge, remembering the Anderson order from Arnold, felt that Anderson and Arnold were plotting something. Talmadge ordered Anderson brought to him. The outpost officer who outranked Talmadge reluctantly agreed, but insisted that a report about Anderson be sent on to Arnold at West Point, where Arnold was expecting a visit from George Washington. Andre, under questioning by Talmadge, drew on his talents as an amateur actor and posed as a misunderstood merchant. But the sharp-eyed Talmadge knew from the way that Anderson paced across the floor that he had to be a military officer. Andre finally admitted his identity, but insisted he was a combat officer, not a spy. Talmadge instantly realized that Arnold was a traitor. Arnold got the report on the capture of Anderson and the suspicious papers before Washington arrived. He knew immediately he had been unmasked. He ran out of the room, rode a horse to the riverside, and ordered his bargemen to take him downriver to the Vulture. When they looked at him suspiciously, he said that he had to meet with the warship's captain because of particular business from Washington. As soon as the barge reached the warship, Arnold climbed aboard and had the bargemen arrested as prisoners of war. When Washington arrived at West Point, he learned of Arnold's treachery. "Great Arnold has stolen off to the enemy," he is said to have exclaimed. He ordered Captain Alexander Hamilton to lead a search for Arnold. Then, according to a witness, Washington left the room and, giving way to an uncontrollable burst of feeling, wept. This was the first time anyone had ever seen Washington cry. Early the next day, Talmadge took Andre to Washington's headquarters in Tappan, New York. There, he was put on trial before a military court, which found him guilty. In a message sent under a flag of truce, Washington told British General Henry Clinton in New York that he would spare Andre's life if Clinton turned over Arnold. Clinton would not allow the exchange. Arnold wrote Washington and threatened that if Andre were hanged, Arnold would retaliate on such unhappy persons of your army as may fall within my power. Washington ordered Andre hanged. With Talmadge standing nearby, Andre was hanged in full dress uniform. His last words were, "I pray you bear me witness that I met my fate like a brave man." Arnold, safe in British-occupied New York, was commissioned as a British brigadier general. He immediately started looking for American spies in New York. He flushed out Hercules Mulligan and ordered him arrested, but Mulligan outwitted Arnold and was released. An unproved story has persisted that Arnold had Agent 355 held captive aboard the prison ship Jersey, anchored off Brooklyn, and that she was one of the thousands of prisoners who died on the Hulk of Horror. Washington ordered Major Light Horse Harry Lee to take charge of what today would be called a special operation, the kidnapping of Benedict Arnold. For the operation, Lee picked his Sergeant Major John Champay, a man full of bone and muscle and tried courage. Champay was charmed with the plan, which Washington himself had hatched. Pretend you are a deserter, slip into British-held New York City, kidnap Arnold, get him to waiting agents in New Jersey, and do him no harm. He must be publicly hanged. Champay stole some official papers from Lee as part of his cover, hopped on a horse, and headed for New York. Lee told no one about the mission that Washington had entrusted to Champay, so Champay was on his own when he tried to get through American lines, then make his way through British lines to get into New York City. Lee thought all was going well, until one of his officers rushed up on him and reported that a patrol had ordered an American to stop. The man put spur to his horse and escaped, but not for long. The patrol spotted him again and chased him until he neared the Hudson River. There, he jumped off his horse, leaped into the water, and swam toward a British patrol boat, yelling for help. The British fired at Champay's pursuers and took him aboard. The British, impressed by the deserter's bravery, took him before General Henry Clinton. Clinton sent him to Arnold, who had formed an American legion of Tories and deserters. As soon as he joined the legion, Champay took note of Arnold's habits and, with the aid of two of Washington's agents in New York, plotted a kidnapping. Sergeant Champay got word of the plan to Lee, and on the night of the kidnapping was going to happen, Lee led a patrol to the New Jersey side of the Hudson and waited with three extra horses, one for Arnold, one for the sergeant, and the third for his Champay's associate. Lee later wrote, "Hour after hour passed. No boat approached. The kidnap plot failed, because on the night it was to happen, Arnold loaded his American legion, including Champay, on board a transport and sailed to Virginia, where he attacked Richmond. Champay became a deserter again, this time a real deserter, and found his way to Washington. Fearing that Champay would be executed if Arnold caught him, Washington discharged him from the Continental Army. The next would-be Arnold kidnapper was an experienced agent named Allen McLean. He once had disguised himself as a simple country yokel and prowled a British fort for 2 weeks. Captain McLean felt sure that he could kidnap Arnold when the general took his morning ride along the Chesapeake Bay. But McLean also failed, because at the last minute, British warships unexpectedly appeared. Thomas Jefferson, governor of Virginia, was the next plotter. He concocted a scheme to abduct this greatest of traitors, while he was leading raids on Virginia. Once again, Arnold was too well guarded. He continued his career as a British officer until the end of the war, when he sailed to England.